What about Maryland? How much harder does that make the picture for Democrats?
Look, it was a great development for Republicans that Larry Hogan decided to run in Maryland. I do think that ultimately the Democrats are still favored to hold the Maryland Senate seat. Maryland is one of the bluest states in the country. It's a presidential year. But Hogan's got a lot of goodwill from when he was governor. Although, I feel like we have seen this movie before in some other states, particularly when the shoe was on the other foot. Popular former and current Democratic governors in red states running for Senate seats. Republicans had to spend money in those places. There was close polling. Those Democrats were sometimes leading, but ultimately the Republicans ended up holding those seats, like Montana in 2020 and Tennessee in 2018. So I still like the Democrats in Maryland, but this would be a totally sleepy race in the general election were it not for Hogan running. So that development's good for Republicans anyway.
Well, I'll tell you what, Karl Rove is writing about this in the Wall Street Journal this morning, Kyle, pointing to a March 12 Washington Post poll that shows Larry Hogan with a double-digit lead over both of the major Democrats vying for this office. Hypothetical here, I'll give you. If Republicans take the state of Maryland, is it over?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Democrats cannot afford to lose a Senate seat in Maryland. They've got a bunch of other seats they're defending in much more marginal states. You mentioned Montana and Ohio. West Virginia is basically gone at this point. And then there are a bunch of marginal Biden-won 2020 states that have Senate races this year. Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada. The Democrats have done really well on this group of Senate races, really in every election going back to 1994, which was the Republican Revolution with Newt Gingrich and the Republicans flipped the House and the Senate that year. One of these years, the Democrats are going to have a really bad election on this map. They're hoping it's not this year, but they do have a lot of vulnerabilities, and Maryland is just added on top of all that.
Okay, so Kyle, while we're having a conversation about whether or not the Senate majority can stay the majority come January, we're also having a conversation about how the House majority can barely stay a majority right now because of all the retirements. Ken Buck's last day was last week. Mike Gallagher is going to be gone in a couple of weeks. We're talking about a margin of one vote here that Speaker Mike Johnson has to work with, while a motion to vacate filed by Marjorie Taylor Greene is hanging over his head. Just how unique is this moment for the vulnerability of a majority?
Look, I mean, we wouldn't really have any actual modern precedent or really much precedent at all for the House potentially changing hands during an actual Congress. The only comparable example I could think of was way back in 1930 in the midterm. The Democrats won a bunch of seats, but they came up just slightly short of winning the majority. But back then, the House didn't open until the following December of 1931. A bunch of special elections in that time frame. Democrats ended up, winning the House in that little interregnum period. But, look, if there were some more vacancies, you could see a situation where temporarily maybe the Democrats could actually have a majority and elect a speaker for a short amount of time. And even if it doesn't happen now, it could happen in the future, given how closely contested the House is these days.
Well, that would be incredible. Look, some Democrats have offered to potentially help protect Mike Johnson under certain circumstances if a Marjorie Taylor Greene or someone triggers a motion to vacate. The question is, what's the price? Are we talking about a power sharing agreement? Or, Kyle, would it be, in fact, floor time for a bill to fund Ukraine?
I mean, that's what's being, being discussed. And look, I mean, in some ways, we're not really dealing with a traditional majority situation in the House right now because Speaker Johnson has had to rely on Democratic votes through this suspension of the rules process that requires two-thirds majorities to pass some of these must-pass bills. And there are more Democrats voting for these things than Republicans are. So, yes, the Republicans are still in the majority, and they have many of the trappings of being a majority. But usually in the House, one party can be unified and pass the things it wants to pass, but that's just not the case in the House right now. So the Democrats do have some leverage, and they may have some leverage if someone tries to topple Johnson as Speaker.
Well, and then it becomes a question of would it actually be a Hakeem Jeffries speaker after that potentially, or is someone else going to have to try and potentially fail, as we saw play out several times this fall once Kevin McCarthy was vacated? Obviously, though, Kyle, there is still, before the general election in November, a number of special elections that could help decide really how the House is balanced in the interim. Is there one in particular you are watching that has the potential to surprise?
So unfortunately for we election watchers, these special House elections coming up are all in pretty uncompetitive seats. And so once Mike Gallagher resigns, it's going to be 217 to 213 Republican. The next special election coming up is April 30th in New York's 26th district, very heavily Democratic seat. Democrats should get up to 217 to 214 Republican. And then the Republicans are going to fill a few additional seats in May and June and get up to a 220 to 214 majority. But that assumes also there aren't any more resignations or more vacancies, and there's always the possibility at any time there could be a new vacancy.